right, let's dive into one of the most difficult conversations of our time, but maybe from an angle you haven't really considered. Today, we're going to explore the potential long-term legacies of the abortion debate. And we're not taking sides here. Instead, we're just breaking down the arguments presented in one particular source.
To get a sense of the scale we're talking about, let's just start with this number, 125,000. According to the World Health Organization, that's the estimated number of abortions performed every single day, worldwide. That number alone shows you why this is such a massive global topic.
Now, the point of this explainer isn't to rehash the same arguments you've probably heard a million times. What we're doing is focusing on how this one source analyzes the potential legacies of the whole debate. The lasting impact it could have on people, on relationships, and even on society itself.
So, before we can jump into those legacies, we've got to set the stage. We need to quickly run through the two main opposing viewpoints that really define this whole issue, at least as our source lays them out. So, on one side, you have the pro-choice argument. This is the idea that having access to abortion is a basic right, totally essential for a woman's control over her own body and her life. And on the other side, you've got the pro-life argument, which sees the fetus as a human being from as early as 21 days, when a heartbeat can be detected, and frames abortion as ending a life that can't defend itself. To build their case, the pro-life argument presented in our source brings up this statistic. It says that only about 1.5% of abortions are because of rape or incest, which are often the reasons that get the most sympathy when people talk about justifying the procedure. And to show just how widespread this is, the source also points to another number. In the United States, it's estimated that about 1 in 4 women have had an abortion. That really underscores how common it's become.
Okay, so this brings us to a really key question that the source digs into. Your first thought might be, well, of course, if you make abortion legal, the rates are going to go through the roof. But is that what the data actually shows?
Well, here's where it gets kind of counterintuitive. The text points to a finding from a Guttmacher Institute study. It turns out that over the last 25 years, abortion rates have actually fallen in a lot of countries, even while those same countries were making it legal. And get this, the study notes that countries with the strictest laws often have the highest rates of abortion.
And this is a perfect example of how the same piece of data can be used to fuel both sides of the argument. Our source explains that while researchers usually say, hey, this is because of better access to birth control, the pro-life movement sees it differently. They say it's proof of post-abortion regret that women who've had one are talking other women out of it. It's just a stark reminder of how deep the divide really is.
Now, all of this complexity sets us up for the first major legacy our source brings up. And this argument shifts the whole focus away from just being a woman's choice and moves it towards a question of shared responsibility.
This quote right here is the absolute heart of the argument in the text. It reframes the whole idea of pregnancy. It's not something that just happens to a woman. It's the consequence of an act that involves two people, whether that act was planned or, well, careless.
The source then builds on this idea with some pretty clear logic. If a pregnancy requires two people, then the man is just as responsible for what happens next. The text argues that by making the decision feel like it's all on the woman, our current debate basically gives a lot of men a pass to just walk away from the consequences of their actions.
Okay, on to the second legacy our source dives into. This one is much broader. It suggests that the whole abortion debate has played a part in a much bigger shift in our society's values and how we behave.
The main claim here is that the conversation around abortion has happened at the same time as a huge cultural change. The source argues that an act that was once seen with a lot of seriousness, a kind of sanctity even, has been replaced by a sort of carelessness that you can see all over modern life.
And then the text asks a pretty provocative question. Could this casual attitude in one part of life be spilling over into others? It points to things like a declining respect for authority, more casual ways of dressing, even a lack of self-control in how we talk, all as possible signs of this bigger, more careless trend in society.
This brings us to the final, and definitely the most abstract legacy presented in the source. This argument moves past the physical and the societal and goes straight into the spiritual realm, introducing an idea you really don't hear in the mainstream debate.
The text puts forward this concept of a spiritual life before life. So, what does that even mean? Well, it's the belief that a human being exists as a spiritual entity, you could say a soul, before it's even born, just waiting for its chance to incarnate in a physical body here on Earth. So, if you look at it from that perspective, abortion is way more than just a physical act.
The source argues it's actually denying a waiting spirit its planned opportunity to come to Earth, to learn lessons, maybe to resolve things from past lives. It's framed not just as a choice, but as an uncharitable act toward another spiritual being.
And then the source does something really interesting. It connects this very abstract idea to a very real experience. It suggests that the post-abortion regret that some women feel might be more than just psychological. It could be a kind of psychic discomfort caused by cutting those unseen, ethereal ties with that waiting spirit.
So as we wrap this up, the big theme that comes through from the text is this. Whether we're talking physical, societal, or spiritual, our choices and our actions have consequences. They create a legacy that, according to this source, we all carry with us. One that can either be a blessing for our future or a source of regret.
Ultimately, this analysis doesn't really give us any easy answers. Instead, it just pushes us to think beyond the usual battle lines of the debate. It leaves us with a much bigger question to think about, not just for this issue, but for all of our hardest choices. What is the legacy we are creating?